In this video, we'll introduce method references in Java and explain how they can simplify your code when working with functional programming. Method references are a shorthand notation for Lambda expressions that refer to existing methods or constructors. They provide a neat way to pass an existing method as an argument, making your code more readable and straightforward, once you're over the syntax, that is. The syntax of a method references doesn't have the arrow. It has a double colon. Here's what it looks like. Name, colon, colon, method name. What should be on the place of name depends on the type of method reference. It can be a method on an instance. In that case, we need the name of the instance. It can also be the name of the class, for example, when it's a static method. There are 4 types of method references in Java. We can reference to a static method. We can reference to an instance method of a particular object. But we can also reference an instance method of an arbitrary object of a particular type. And we can reference to a constructor. Let's explore them in IntelliJ. Alright, let's start with a reference to a static method. Alright, so let's implement a function. And this function is going to have integers in input and return a string. And what we're going to do is we're going to do number to hex string here. And I'm first going to implement this with a lambda to show you how this would be done. So our input would be some value, an integer, so I take an I, but we could call it anything. So I say I, and then I say integer, and then we're going to call the static toHex string method on it. And in there, I'm going to pass in the I, like this. So this is the lambda way to do it. This isn't new. I mean, it might still be relatively new, but we've seen this already. Let's see the method reference way to do this. So number to hex string method reference. So what we're going to say here is integer, since that's the name of the class, double colon, and then to hex string. And we don't need to pass anything in, because it can deduct from the context that we need to pass in the integer, since it's a function. And then we can call the method on here exactly like we would call it for a normal lambda expression. So we'd go number to hex string method reference dot apply, and then we could pass in some number. And if we want to see the result, which we actually might, I need to surround this with a system out print line, otherwise we won't see anything. So let me run this code so we can see the result. And there you go. If you don't know what this does, you might want to look into hexadecimal numbers. It's quite a fun topic as well. It's unfortunately out of the scope of this course. Let's have a look at the next one. We're going to create a reference to an instance method of a particular object. So let's create some sort of string. I'm going to say string, called string prefix, equals hello, like this. I'm going to use function again, and this function is going to take string as an input and give string as an output. And I'm going to call this greet. And then I'm going to start implementing it with a lambda again. So I'm going to say s, arrow, prefix plus s. There we go. But this would be nicer to do with a method reference. So let's go again, say function string string. And we call this greet method reference. So this time use prefix, use a double colon, and then specify concat. And this is enough, because it can figure out that we need to pass in the string, and it will use the prefix. So let's show the result of this one too. And this should print hello you. Let's run this code and see for ourselves. And there we go. Let's use a built-in interface that we haven't seen yet. And we're going to use this for a reference to an instance method of an arbitrary object of a particular type. So what is a by function? By function is a lot like the function, but instead of taking one input, it's taking 2 inputs. and this one is going to take 2 strings as input. So the first 2 are the parameters, and the return type is going to be an integer. What I want to do, I want to compare the 2 input strings. I want to return 0 when they're equal, return a positive number when the first one is bigger, and return a negative number when the second one is bigger. And I'm going to do this by calling the string compare to ignore case method. So let's again first do this with a lambda expression. So we have 2 input strings. And what we're going to do, we're going to pass them to the method compare to ignore case. And I pass in s2 as the argument here. And we can also do this with a method reference. And that's done like this. We can say string compare to ignore case. Then based on the circumstances, it can actually deduct that it needs to compare S1 and S2, even though we never called them that. So let me show you that this is working. And let's add in 2 similar words, but then the difference is going to be the casing. There we go. And let's see the results for ourselves. And there you go, it returns 0, meaning that they're equal. And they are when we ignore case. Alright, the last one is a reference to a constructor. A very common thing we want to do is to create a supplier that's returning some sort of type. For example, we could create a supplier for an array list of type string. Again, I need to import supplier, and I'm calling this list supplier. And then in here, I'll say array list : new. This is actually the method reference way to do it right away. And then right now, I could go ahead and say array list type string, call it, well, let's call it names, equals list supplier dot gets. And then we can go ahead and add some names to the list. There we go. And let's just prove this by printing the name. And this should print my name, Micah. Alright, so when we use the method reference, we can leave a lot of more things to the context. And this way, it can deduct from the context what return type is going to be. Please mind, we can only use method references for existing methods. They're literally referencing a method. Another important thing to note is that the method that is referenced must have a compatible signature with the functional interface that we're implementing. In other words, the input parameters and the return type should match those of the interface's abstract method. And that's exactly why they can be omitted, since they must match anyways. In conclusion, method references in Java are an even cleaner way to pass methods as arguments, which can be particularly helpful when working with functional programming features. It's not always possible. It's only possible when we're using an existing method. In all the other situations, we'll still need the lambda expression. In the next video, we'll explore the powerful Stream API and see how it leverages functional interfaces, lambda expressions, and method references.